I didn't mean to overhear that night. But sometimes, fate has a cruel way of shoving you face first into truths you've been trying to avoid. You tell yourself everything's fine, or at least salvageable, but deep down, you always know. It was just past midnight when I got back from the store. I was holding a plastic bag with a bottle of cheap red wine and 2 frozen dinners. The kind you grab when even pretending to care about dinner feels like too much effort. They weren't meals. They were a silent confession. Quiet surrender. They screamed what neither of us dared to say out loud. This marriage is fraying, thread by thread. I pushed the door open as quietly as I could, not wanting to wake her. I thought maybe she was asleep, maybe we'd sit down tomorrow and talk like grown-ups do, if we still knew how. But then I heard her voice. It was low, tight with emotion, like someone who's been holding something in for far too long. "I can't stand being with him, Sarah," she said. "I feel caged. He's like a ghost I can't escape." That one sentence was a blade, and it sliced straight through the center of me. I froze in the hallway, still holding the bag. My breath caught, suspended in disbelief. I hadn't been meant to hear that, but I had. And in that one moment, everything I'd been trying not to see finally came into focus. The distant glances, the forced smiles, the way she recoiled slightly when I reached for her hand in bed. It all made sense now. I was a weight she no longer wanted to carry. Marriage starts out like a fever dream, all passion and promises. You talk about forever like it's an unshakable truth. You laugh at nothing, steal kisses in grocery store aisles, and stay up until 2 a.m. making plans for a life neither of you fully understand yet. But then time passes. Life gets heavier. The magic dulls. Suddenly you're coexisting. Sharing space but not each other. Car rides are silent. Dinners feel like performances. And at night they sleep turned away from you, taking their warmth with them. Claire and I met in our early 20s, full of fire and reckless optimism. She used to look at me like I hung the stars. That look was everything. It was my fuel. But somewhere along the way that light faded. Or maybe I stopped being the man she saw in the beginning. I fell into routine, wake up, go to work, come home, repeat. I tried to be dependable, to be what she needed. But predictability, it turns out, isn't always comforting. Sometimes it's suffocating. Standing in the dark hallway, listening to her say she couldn't stand being with me, it felt like my chest was in a vice. I could have walked in, demanded an explanation, asked her to say it to my face. But I didn't. I just turned around, went upstairs, packed a small duffel with enough clothes for a few days, and walked out the front door. No note. No dramatic exit. Just silence. If she wanted space, if she felt trapped, then I'd give her the freedom she longed for. I ended up at a run-down motel on the outskirts of town. The kind of place people only go when they've got nowhere else to be. The walls were stained, the sheets scratchy, and the air smelled like old cigarettes and cheap cleaner. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the tacky wallpaper, and wondered how long she'd felt that way. How many nights had she laid beside me, pretending? How many days had she smiled while secretly counting down to an escape? By morning, my phone lit up with messages. Missed calls, voicemails, texts. "Where are you? We need to talk. Please come back." It was almost funny. The woman who felt haunted by my presence now panicking over my absence. I let her sit with it. Let her marinate in the silence I used to swallow every day. 2 days later, she showed up at the motel. She looked nothing like the woman I left behind. Hair unkempt, eyes hollow, like sleep hadn't visited her in days. "Why did you go?" she asked in a whisper, voice cracking. I gave her a bitter, humorless laugh. "Do you really need me to spell it out?" She flinched, like she hadn't expected me to be so blunt. "You weren't supposed to hear that." So that was it. Not regret for saying it, just regret that I heard it. That I caught the truth she'd been hiding behind weary smiles and half-hearted kisses. Something in me broke right then. Not loudly. Just a quiet snap, the last thread holding me to her. I stepped aside and let her in. She stood awkwardly, refused to sit. I guess she didn't want to look too comfortable. "Was it true?" I asked, keeping my voice steady. She hesitated. "Just a beat too long." And that silence. It was everything. Claire, once so quick with words, was suddenly speechless. I was upset, she finally said. Frustrated. I didn't mean it like that. I shook my head slowly. You don't say something like that unless you've been holding it in for a while. Tears welled in her eyes. I love you, but don't cut her off. I don't need the but. I know how this story ends. She broke down then, sobbing. Her shoulders trembled, her breath caught in hiccups of grief. But I didn't reach for her. I didn't comfort her. For years I'd been the one craving affection, reassurance, wondering what I did wrong. Now it was her turn to sit in the ache of losing something she thought would always be there. I never went back. The divorce that followed was messy, bitter. But my recovery wasn't. Strange how pain sharpens clarity. I realized that leaving her wasn't the hardest thing I'd ever done. Staying in a life where I was no longer wanted, that had been the real torment. Claire reached out a few times after the dust settled, trying to reignite something that had long turned to ash. But I had found something better. Something quieter. And eventually, I met someone who looked at me with eyes that didn't dim. Eyes that saw me, truly saw me, and made me feel like I carried the stars again.